Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video, I'll be talking about trinket philosophy changing going into patch 10.2 with a couple of little updates that we got this evening as I make this video about trinkets getting nerfed from Aberrus, not right now, but heading into 10.2, and then some trinket tuning again for the new trinkets in Emirjasil as well. And we're gonna go over those real quick, and then we're gonna talk about what I think they're kind of doing philosophically regarding trinkets, at least for now. So developers know as players prepare to delve into Emirjasil, we are adjusting several Aberrus trinkets to account for changes to tuning targets, and here's the word, philosophy, as well to mitigate effects which have proven simply too synergistic with class power. As with Vault of Incarnates, we want to avoid scenarios where item power could drive players to continue running old content that they otherwise would leave behind. So Rashok's Molten Heart, this is like the really good healer trinket. Mana Restore reduced by 70%, healing reduced by 50%, and Verse reduced by 20%. So this is just saying, okay, this trinket's just, you're not going to use this trinket anymore. Beacon to the Beyond, damage reduced by 11%. Not as much, but enough to where it would be like a not good trinket compared to new trinkets. Ominous Chromatic Essence, again, not a huge nerf, but secondary stat granted reduced by 5%. Again, just trying to make sure they're not being used. And Neltharion's Call to Dominance. This is the notably the Warlock one, Hunter, Shaman, Warlock, Monk. Duration increased to 20 seconds over 10, but primary stat granted reduced by 50%. Again, trying to, make that not something you want to use in Emirjasil. This is good. But now we also have some because it's good in my opinion, because generally speaking, especially in retail World of Warcraft, you don't really want to use old items. And like, let's say you're switching mains or you're switching whatever, and you have to go back and farm an old trinket for that character. That's terrible. So generally speaking, this is a good thing. Emirjasil trinket changes. So the Blossom of Emirjasil, this actually gets a buff. All healing absorbs increased by 20%. So again, this is kind of like, you're going to lose so much power with Rashok's. You need to have at least one good trinket. So I'm guessing they're trying to make this to be just a really good trinket. Now we actually have another nerf here. It's the Cataclysmic Signet brand. Damage reduced by 16.5%. This is one of those trinkets where the longer you're in combat, the more damage it does. And so the damage is reduced by 16.5%. That's a pretty significant nerf to that trinket. And it already wasn't necessarily the best trinket, but it was pretty good. Unraveling Spindle, damage increased by 30%, so it gets mobilized. That's not too big of a deal. It's just about whether target's immobilized or not. Gift of Ursine Vengeance. This is the the tank trinket here? Gain for consuming, generating health. Yeah, damage increased by 37.5. Health regen decreased by 8.5. Fryak's Tainted Rage Heart, the absorb and inflicted damage, so like the negative, is increased by 50%, but the damage is also increased by 31%. This is incredible. This is a very strong trinket. I can't speak to everybody, but for Rep Paladin, this was already shaping up to be one of the strongest trinkets. And with this, a 31% more damage, I mean, I can't imagine it not being kind of like, for Rep Paladin specifically, and for many specs, kind of just the best trinket. Cantrips, so like the things that are on weapons, damage decreased by 5% on Golak. On Roshan, damage is decreased by 5 as well. On Vikash, the Shadowed Inferno, damage is decreased by 5% as well. And on the Claw, the Fist Weapon, dot damage increased by 10% and proc damage increased by 15%. So I'm guessing that's just kind of tuning these to all be the same. And what we see is, but we see some nerfs here, right? So you're seeing not only nerfs, so we're seeing nerfs to Aberrus for obvious reasons, but we're even seeing nerfs to new things that aren't incredibly strong already. And I think this is a philosophical change. In season 1, we saw things like Manic Grief Torch, right? Manic Grief Torch, whoever got the most Manic Grief Torches, you were set for progression, right? Like, it was just, everybody used their Grief Torch. Somebody dies, everybody uses their Grief Torch. It was so powerful for progression rating. And then in season 2, we didn't have something quite like that. But with Beacon of the Beyond, if you were able to get a bunch of Beacon of the Beyonds early, again, that really helps with progression. That helps. It helps in Mythic Plus as well for, making sure certain targets die for like really high end groups. And so Here in season 3, it seems like they're kind of trying to go away from that massive trinket power. And I think what they're doing too, and then we see this too, kind of like it's only 5%, and let's assume that this 15% increase is raising it to the same amount as these are when they're minus 5%. So they're taking a little bit of power from the weapon effect, a little bit less power overall in trinkets. And what I think we're seeing here is they're trying to focus our power into our item level. This is something they've been trying to do for a while, I should say. Not always have done, but they've been trying to do this for a while, where they're trying to focus our power into just getting our new gear, right? This is more of a classic take on WoW, right? Not even classic, but just not the most recent time where we have these trinkets that do incredible percentage of our damage and weapon effects that do incredible percentage of our damage. And it seems like they're trying to just get it more to like eye level, and then everything is kind of, you know, you're still gonna have a best trinket, you're still gonna have a best weapon, of course, but they're trying to like get it to where it's not doing as high a percentage of your damage, and therefore it's not quote unquote borrowed power, right? Because what happens, and I think what they realize here, is when you have to keep, when the first season trinket, Mana Grief Torch, was very strong, you then have to have something better than that for season 2, or else why would you replace Mana Grief Torch, or you just have to nerf it each time. But again, this is the whole borrow power argument. Now, the same thing with tier sets. Tier sets always are expected to get a little bit stronger each patch. So because you want to get more powerful as the expansion goes on, you don't want to get less powerful, generally speaking. Now, sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes a tier set is weaker from tier to tier, and that always feels bad. But this is the same thing with trinkets. And by doing this, if they, and not necessarily just for this patch, but if this is their philosophy going forward, what you're going to see is you're going to see trinkets do a less percentage of your total damage, and your total damage is mostly going to be coming from you, which kind of feels good, right? Now that increases importance on your tier set. That increases importance on your weapon effect if your weapon has an effect on it, even if it's not that much. Now without your trinket doing 10% of your damage, you know, your weapon doing, you know, an extra 4% or something all of a sudden becomes really, really, really good, right? And so kind of just moving in a direction where we are more based on our eye level. If you have a good trinket with good eye level, you can be competitive. You don't have to have the best in slot trinket, but of course you still want the best in slot trinket or whatever. You're always going to want that. And generally speaking, it's in my opinion, a good philosophy change, because I've been someone who is against the borrowed power for the most part. Again, some borrowed power is liked. People like tier sets. Tier sets are borrowed power, but people like it. So I think we just stick with tier sets because they're generally really, really liked, and so therefore you keep it, right? It's just kind of simple when it comes to tier sets. Trinkets, I think it's a mixed bag, right? I've never really liked a ton of my damage coming from my trinket personally. It always felt like a little weird, especially like, oh well, they just have a higher eye level trinket than me, or they have the good trinket and I don't, and that's like the difference in our damage, and that always felt a little bit weird, honestly, to me. And so you know, I think trinkets are one of those in between things, kind of like weapon effects, where I think the community likes trinkets that are strong, but at the same time, if they have to keep getting stronger and stronger each tier or whatever, it becomes ridiculous by the end of the patch. Like, you just have these monstrous trinkets. Now, in a game like Diablo or something like that, I think that's considered fun. Like, by the end of your build, by the end of whatever, you're just one-shotting everything. But obviously you can't do that in World of Warcraft. That's not what World of Warcraft's about. You don't just get to go on and one-shot the bosses and stuff like that, unless there's like a bug or something. And so, you know, I think generally speaking, it's just a little bit healthier way to look at it. I don't want them to neuter trinkets completely, and I don't think they are here. Like, we didn't continue to talk about it too much, but the Firex Tainted Rage Heart, like I said, that was already going to be very good for Rep Paladin. With this increase by 31%, this trinket's going to be very, very strong for at least some specs. This trinket's going to be very strong, and I'm sure there's going to be other trinkets that are quite strong too. That maybe for agility or something I haven't personally looked into very much. Like, I've looked into the strength trinkets because that's what I play. But you know, this is going to be a good high amount of damage, but it's also, I think it's very rare loot, and it's off of Frack, and so it's like a pinnacle thing or whatever. So maybe that's why. But yeah, overall, I like the philosophy. Let me know if you don't like the philosophy. But generally speaking, and I could be wrong, but what I'm saying is, so what I'm asking you if you like is, do you like the idea of more of our power coming just from our gear and our eye level? So like our strength increasing, our stats increasing essentially, strength increasing, secondary stats increasing, some borrowed power from our tier sets, and then a lot less borrowed power from our trinkets. I like that personally, but I could see some people being like, no, I really, really liked strong trinkets. I like when a trinket does 10 to 20% of my damage, whatever. Some people might like that. That's completely fair too. I would be curious to know overall what the community felt about that. So that's it for this one. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out so much. Other than that, everybody, have a good one.